Greetings and salutations, and welcome to episode 157 of Ref the District. I'm Nathan Perry. That up top is the Stoner, and Trev joining us here tonight, at least for a little while. So be kind to him while he's here with us. He might have to bail a little bit.
I welcome all smoke. It's cool.
You are absolutely a fan favorite, Trev, as they were getting in on you last week, and we love to see all of that. As we already have a lot of people here streaming, as we stream live every Wednesday here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, also known as X. Tony already in the chat. Andre Locked On Law here as well. TJ in the house. We got Roger, Doug, Gus, and ProCAD. Brian here as well. We appreciate everybody jumping in here on that Don't Sleep chat, as we've got a wonderful, wonderful show for you here on episode 157. In the cool down, it was the biggest buzz, and it's the reason why we had it as our thumbnail for this. It was Mel Kiper's mock draft 1.0, Jayden Daniels to the Commanders. We're going to be talking all about that there in the cool down session. Probably maybe not so much of a cool down, because I'm sure we're all going to get quite heated in that discussion. Then during the game, we're going to go over the candidates, as Washington has hired Adam Peters. They are now trying to look into their head coach. We've heard lots of rumors about Ben Johnson going to be the next head coach, but we got to pump the brakes a little bit. They're still conducting interviews as we speak, trying to go through. They can't get to Ben Johnson until next week. And I know I told people, and we posted it on our Twitter, that I wasn't going to get a haircut or trim the beard until Ben Johnson was hired. But hey, EP's got bigger say in that than I do. So that one happened before you know it. And then here in the warm-up, we're going to be talking about EB as the next head coach, as he got an interview, and there was some high praise coming from that front office about said interview. We'll talk about how realistic that is. Of course, if you're looking to see who's going to become the next head coach, the odds are out there on Bet Online, and you can head over to Bet Online. Use the code BELIEVE to get yourself a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. So go ahead and do that, because they have all of your sports wagering news and info right at your fingertips. You can bet on the NFL playoffs. You can bet on the NBA. It's Lakers and Clippers tonight. Who do you got? Let us know in the chat. And then, of course, head over to Bet Online, because Bet Online, where the game starts. Of course, we encourage you to bet responsibly as well. Don't be crazy and bet your 401k like a certain somebody on this podcast continues to do. It's amazing that he'll be able to retire here in a couple of years. EB not going to be retiring anytime soon. He's not going to bet his 401k on getting the Washington job. Although, gentlemen, again, I said he got some really high praise for what he did in that interview. Trev, you're already kind of shaking and poo-pooing your head on this one. Why wouldn't you want Eric Bieniemy here as our next head coach in DC?
Because his time is up. I mean, it's just now when we hired him at the beginning of the season to be OC, I was hyped. If you would ask me this beginning of the season, I'm like, yeah, he's surefire going to be the head coach next year. That's why they got him here. Start him off as OC to get him in the seat of HC this year. But I mean, you hear the drama that came out during the season with him as the OC. Players were, not happy. They were uncomfortable. They weren't used to his hardcore ways, which is, I mean, kind of soft, but I mean, it happens in the league. People are human beings. So it's just, it wasn't like a very good connection from the beginning. And I'm over it. I don't think that we went through getting Josh Harris and crew, and now Adam Peters, just to be like, AEB, you could be the head coach. I mean, he's interviewed so many other places for the HC spot and didn't get it for a reason. I think we kind of see that why he didn't get it. If he stays on another capacity, that's cool, but the head coach from here, I just don't see us having the star power we have in the front office just to be like, here, EB, here's your chance to be head coach.
I do think that's a great point you make there, Trev, as this front office feels different than previous ones. Snyder might have been in a position where he would have to hire Eric Bieniemy because no one wanted to work for him, and you already got a
Right.
guy in the building, and so you're like, hey, you're already working for me, get promoted. Kind of like Zorn happened that kind of way, hired as an offensive coordinator. No one wanted the head coaching job, and so Zorn ended up with that head coaching position. So I absolutely agree with that point. Where I kind of do disagree with you, Trev, is the fact that I think he's shown this year, not on the field, mind you, but I think that he showed this year that he has the capacity to be a head coach. The way he handled himself in front of the media, the way that he was handling himself with players and that front office, I think that he has that head coach potential. Remember, we heard before he came here how, he would get these interviews and nothing would happen. He was like, you figured he couldn't speak or he couldn't talk to what he was trying to do. And then he gets in front of the DC media and he's a star. And he absolutely won us over. Remember, why not Washington? We fell in love. And then he articulates himself so well when he does his press conferences with the media, when he talked about Sam Howell and his progression. I mean, he called it what it was. He was like, he's just not playing well enough. But there's these, and he started talking about the tools and what he has and how he can be successful. So I think he showed that he could be a head coach this year. The problem is he didn't really show it on the field. But Stoner, do you think that hurts him more as an offensive coordinator? Do you think they can see past that if he were to look to be the head coach here in DC?
Well, I think it's just a little too much to kind of think of him as the head coach here. I think he is head coach material, as you just mentioned, as both of you have really mentioned. He is a leader of men. I believe that. But I don't believe that he's actually a very good offensive coordinator. He had a 17-game audition this year. That's his resume to Washington fans and the Washington organization. He had 17 games to prove himself as an offensive coordinator, and it didn't work. Did he do well as a leader? I think probably he did. In the future, that may be his role. His best role is as a head coach, the CEO style type head coach. You get a different offensive coordinator, get a different defensive coordinator, and let him go out there and lead the organization. But it's not here. It's not going to be here. I think the telltale sign for me was how many of these guys have been interviewed. We're up to 7 or 8 different guys have been interviewed, right? How many guys have gotten a statement about the interview? One, Eric Bieniemy. They haven't said anything about anybody else about how it's gone or whatever. They've gone out of their way to make him look good because it didn't work well here. So they've made him look good to be able to help him along his way out the door. We're going to help you. We're going to give you all the praise and everything. We're going to give you good, recommendation letters and all this to everybody else. It's not going to be here. This is a clean house situation, and they're just not going to hire a guy who came in as an offensive coordinator and gave him a chance, and he was actually either on par or worse than the guy the year before that you fired. It's just not going to happen here. But I think he is head coach material. Absolutely.
That's interesting. I didn't even think about your note there, Stoner, on the fact that they've interviewed all of these, but the only one they've spoken about is Eric Bieniemy. Now, maybe a little less tinfoil hatty on this, but it could be because he's an in-house candidate and they can speak about him. You can't necessarily always speak about the candidates from outside of your team. And so that might be one of the reasons why. I do think that Eric Bieniemy's chances of becoming a head coach here are very, very slim, if not none. And there's the talk of him becoming an offensive coordinator here. And I also don't see that happening. One of the reasons why we separated Eric Bieniemy from the rest of the candidates is because of his special situation, having been here through the 4-13 season, having worked with Ron Rivera, and now he's been interviewed. One of the other aspects of this, Trev, that with the Eric Bieniemy to DC kind of movement or non-movement, as it were, is all of the head coach candidates that they were looking at came out in that first day, came out within hours of each other. They were requesting these interviews. All of that was very public. Eric Bieniemy didn't get his interview publicized until a week
after. Yeah.
about a week after. Trev, does that speak to how much of the legitimacy of his interview is for him becoming the head coach here in DC?
I think it says that we have requested everybody from the outside that we want to talk to that can possibly come in here and do the right thing. So if you remember, Peter said he's going to start evaluating everything from the players to the coaching staff right away. So now they have the candidates and all the interviews set up. Now they can start evaluating our current staff. And I think EB was the very first one that they did that to become head coach. So maybe that's why it wasn't publicized with everybody else, because we did things on the outside first and then focus on the inside. But for a legitimate, it's a legitimate interview. It just happened to come after we want to go window shop for all the shiny new toys. Sure. Now we're going to look at, hey, maybe this crayon still works, or this toy, this remote control car still has some life in it. Let's see what it's got left. And also, who else would you honestly ask outside of Rivera about how the season went? You got rid of Rivera, so now who you want to talk to about the roster, about how the staff went, how the season went? EB's the next one up. So maybe that was part of the reason why he was interviewed to be head coach, because it's like, all right,
Adam Peters is just trying to get that.
Yeah, he's just trying to, he's been very,
Yeah.
very thorough, like he said. Maybe this is part of the thorough that he's doing. So it's a legitimate interview. It's just not a splash one because it's from the inside, not the outside.
I do appreciate you calling it a legitimate interview, because I've seen people try to brush it off as a Rooney Rule type thing, but that's not the case. You already have minority coaches on the wish list. Raheem Morris, Weaver, Glenn, right? I mean, these are players that are coaches that, would satisfy the Rooney Rule. So an Eric Bieniemy interview wasn't for that. It had to be for something deeper. Now, we've talked a lot about, like, it's not going to happen and that we don't want it to happen. But Stoner, are there any positives to keeping Eric Bieniemy here and promoting him to full-time head coach?
Yeah, let me just say for the record, this is not what I want. But you're asking
Talk us into it.
Yeah. Well, I
Sell
think
us
the positives are, look, he is absolutely 100% a leader of men. People will run through the wall for Eric Bieniemy. They'll also run through the wall for Ron Rivera. So that only takes you so far. That gets you to a certain point. But what he has shown that he cannot do, at least in the 17 games that we saw him this year, is he can't necessarily coach guys above what their natural ability is. He can't get more out of guys than what their ability is. You have guys who either regressed or stayed the same. How many guys in this roster improved offensively, improved from last year to this year? Maybe Curtis Samuel is the only one that really improved.
B-Rob.
Maybe B-Rob, but I mean, B-Rob was hurt
Cosby.
so much last year that not so much, but he missed like 6 games last year. But yeah, there's only so many guys that actually improved. So what does that tell you? He couldn't kind of bring the level of guys up. But they're to a man, those guys will tell you that they play hard for Eric Bieniemy because he inspires them. He's just not very good at necessarily designing an offense. And if you can't coach guys to a certain level, then why do you want him to be the guy who's coaching everybody, not just the offense? But I think he is going to be a head coach in this league. Not this year.
I was about to say, probably not this season. Sure.
He is going to be a head coach in this league.
I think he's more than likely probably going to end up back in Kansas City after everything shakes out, and
could be
try to bring their offense back, because they've talked extensively about how Kansas City and the players and everything saying they're missing him. And on the player aspect, a lot of people agreed B-Rob was somebody who improved this year under Eric Bieniemy, which is interesting because we know that he was pass happy, almost 70% passing over the course of the year. The players are somebody that Josh Harris has openly talked about, saying that they should have a bit of a say in who stays here or who comes here, who they respect. He didn't put a lot of emphasis on it. I think some people took it to mean that the players can pick the coach, and I don't think he was going that route. But I think what he's looking for is he wants to make sure that he has a leader of men, as you put it, Stoner.
Mm-hmm.
But Trev, there was plenty of conversations about how people didn't like working under Eric Bieniemy. So how does that translate? How does Eric Bieniemy overcome that to become the head coach here? Again, I'm trying to find some positive things here for us to talk about when it comes to Eric Bieniemy coming to DC in case it happens, because I don't want us all to be negative and then he gets hired and we're like, well, we're done.
Yeah,
Well, I might be that way I might be done if he gets hired as head coach.
It's just tough because it feels like when you come to Washington, you're taking a huge risk of your career being deaded, if not deaded, like minimized. But if you start off here and leave, you flourish. A la Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur. We all know the coaching tree. So, I mean, I guess if you got to ask the captains, you got to ask Terry McLaurin, you got to ask Jonathan Allen, you got to get them all in the room together so you can kind of feel as how the locker room and the roster went as a whole, not just offense and defense. It's just hard because EB came from Kansas City, right, where they had talented players on both sides of the ball. Like more than 2 or 3 that you can list. Started with Pat Mahomes all the way down to Juan Thornhill when he was a safety there. Like, it was good. But then you bring him here to Washington where you have Terry McLaurin on offense and Jonathan Allen on defense, essentially. And that's it. And it, like Stoner said, EB looks like he called a bad offense. Maybe he did, but maybe the players just weren't competent enough to run that offense. We didn't have the talent. We didn't have the stability. We didn't have the continuity for that to happen. So it's kind of hard to judge that. But for him I'm trying to find a positive too. I don't know. Just talk to the captains.
It is. It's one of the. I think it's hard on a 4-13 season. Where you saw the team scoring again at the bottom of the league. I mean, they weren't as bad statistically as they were last year, but I mean, it wasn't that big of an improvement.
So then if we do hire Ben Johnson, rumor has it he's going to bring O-line coach Hank Fraley, which I think is a spoonerism should be Frank Haley, but it's Hank Fraley. And a B Mitch is on there saying he played with them and he knows if the players don't want to work, he's going to tell them pack your bags and leave. Well, isn't that kind of what EB brought to the organization this year? And some players were kind of like standoffish to it and had their guard up. So if that happens, is that going to happen again? I guess it just depends on the type of culture and players you have in the locker room. Some players can handle the lackadaisical Jay Gruden nipple twisting coaching, and others don't like the EB coming from a winning culture with Andy Reid, Super Bowl AFC like winning culture. They don't adapt to that just easy after one season. So it's EB's in a hard spot. I don't see him being So
yeah, but the thing I never understood from the beginning was why he left Kansas City. And we talked about it when it was kind of the rumor was out there that he was going to come here and be the offensive coordinator. And we were just like, or at least I was just like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Why would he leave such a good situation to come here when it's a lame duck season? We knew it was a season where Ron Rivera was just going to play it out. And that's exactly what happened. Why would he leave that great situation to come here where really the only thing that could happen is your reputation would take a hit to the negative side?
Yeah.
You always have to bet on yourself though, right? And I think that's what he was doing. The talk when he was in Kansas City was always that it wasn't his offense. It was Andy Reid and he's not calling plays and all this. I mean, you heard it this season over and over again. You're at like, was it week 16? That somebody, one of the media came and were like, what's it feel like to call plays for the first time? And he was like, well, going to stop you there. Been calling plays for 6 years. Yeah. And so like that reputation is just carried with him. He needed to get out of Andy Reid to find himself a head coach position. And he thought this year was going to go better. He had to.
Why?
Because you believe in yourself. Don't you believe in yourself? When you sit down to do your job, don't you go like, I can rock this. I know for a fact I've got this. That's what Eric Bieniemy did. And he came here and it just didn't work out for lots of reasons. He had his interview. He had a chance to explain himself on why that happened. and how things happened. And we agree here. It's just not going to work out for him in Washington. We wish him the best. It hasn't been official that he's been let go. Because it hasn't been official, we've hired one of the candidates that we're going to be talking about here. One of them is not, unfortunately, to Jerry and to Stoner, not going to be Jim Harbaugh. News popping out right now. He's going to head to the Chargers. So you can stop wishing for Jim Harbaugh to come here in Washington. Plenty of reasons for him to pick that team, but there's plenty of reasons for teams or these coaches to pick Washington. We'll talk about that here in the game. We're here for the game on episode 157. Going to go over the candidates, kind of the pluses and minuses. Ben Johnson is definitely going to be the one that people are going to want to talk about. And I'm not going to withhold him from you anytime soon. But Gus did challenge me to name a minority coach from the offensive side besides Eric Bieniemy. And I have to admit, Gus, I really can't think of a dedicated offensive minority coach right now, like a head coach candidate right now, or even an offensive coordinator. I am struggling. That's a great question.
Brian Johnson was just let go from the Eagles as offense coordinator.
That's true. Brian Johnson.
There you go, Brian Johnson.
Yeah, and there were people midway through the season who wanted Brian Johnson over Ben Johnson. I think even somebody here maybe used our Ref the District account to tweet that.
I may have
I'm not sure.
offered it as a possibility.
I'm not sure who that was, though. I'm not going to call him out or anything like that. But there are coaches here who have experience on both sides of the ball who fit the minority. Raheem Morris is one of them who has that experience on both sides. Morris is one of the ones that you particularly like, Stoner.
Yeah, I do.
So let's go with him first as far as the conversation for head coach candidates, because he is somebody who can be, interviewed in person. In fact, I think they have one this week with him. The Commanders have one with him this week.
Yep.
So let's talk about him, because he's somebody, if he wows, maybe they don't wait for Ben Johnson next week. Maybe they just go ahead and take Raheem Morris. So why do you like Raheem Morris so much, Stoner?
Well, I think Raheem Morris, look, he's number one, he's not that old, right? And when he got that head coaching job in Tampa, and by the way, did they win 12 games in one of those years he was in Tampa? He was like 34 years old, something like that, when he got that head coaching job. And he has gone back since then, and he's grinded his way back to this point where he's ready to be a head coach again. That's the kind of guy I like. I like a guy who has had the experience before and understands what it takes to run a successful football team. I have to be completely honest. The more I keep digging and digging and digging, I'm not sure that I want these Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowik, Anthony Weaver, Mike Macdonald types. I don't know that I really like that idea of it. I understand the kind of the sexiness of those kind of coaches and everything and how it gets people excited. But just because some of these other guys do well at running an offense or running a defense doesn't mean they can run an entire football team. Just because, for example, Mike Macdonald has been a defensive coordinator for a total of 3 years, 1 year at Michigan, 2 years in Baltimore, and has done exceptionally well, doesn't mean that he's all of a sudden going to be a great head coach, because you have to do so much more. Raheem Morris knows what it takes to run an entire football team. And he has grinded through, and he has taken some of these teams, and he's done really well. Now, what I have noticed about his record individually as a defensive coordinator, when he gets to a team, he actually makes them worse defensively. Okay. But again, that's not what I want him to do. I don't want him to come in and be the defensive coordinator and head coach. I want to be the head coach and hire an offensive coordinator and hire a defensive coordinator. He's still young. He was considered a prodigy at one point. He won 12 games in a year before, and he's ready to do it again. Think of all the retreads who have done so much better their second time around. The Bill Belichick's of the world, the Bill Parcells of the world, the Andy Reid's of the world, right? These are retread coaches who the second
McDaniels, right? That's a retread that's worked out so well, every bit of his stops.
Who's that?
McDaniels. I'm just making fun of you right now.
Josh McDaniels.
Yeah.
I'm not. It doesn't
because you're bringing up the exceptions. We get on people when that comes to QBs, right? Because everyone thinking, Sam Howell, he could be the next Tom Brady and stuff, and it's just like Tom Brady is Tom Brady. Brock Purdy may end up being a successful, late round pick, but the numbers don't lie. Late round picks just aren't as successful. And now you're trying to tell me retreads because of one of the greatest coaches of all time who's won 6 Super Bowls, right? That's not the rule, Stoner. That's the exception.
Is it? Is it though? Let's just run through the coaches who have won the last 10 Super Bowls as an example. But are they young
Andy Reid and Bill Belichick?
Other than Sean McVay, all the coaches who win Super Bowls, they are older, experienced. Most of them are retreads.
Okay. Now you're going to make me go through it.
Right.
Let's continue talking about Raheem Morris here.
Okay.
As I look up this information for you.
Raheem Morris is the type of guy who is going to be a leader of men, and he has the experience, and everywhere he's been, the players talk about what a great leader he is and what a great coordinator he is on the defensive side of the ball. That's the kind of guy I want. I want a Raheem Morris type of guy. I'm not saying specifically Raheem Morris, but I'm giving Raheem Morris some props because of what he's done and what you hear from around the league and the type of leader he is. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to bring up a stat, right? I wanted to bring up this stat. Maybe you all have heard it. It's been out there. It was one of those stats that blows me away. But when it comes to offensive coordinators, since 2022, since the start of the 2022 season, 2 seasons ago, every single offensive coordinator has been changed on every single team who had a dedicated offensive coordinator, not the coaches who call plays. But if there was an offensive coordinator on a team, it's done a complete change since 2022. I find that pretty amazing. And there's only 2 defensive coordinators that haven't changed. And that's it. People run through offensive coordinators like it's nothing. Think about that for every team.
It is interesting that I think that we've seen the offensive teams tend to be more exciting, the ones who have offensive-minded coaches, but the ones who tend to find a little bit more success are special teams or defensive-minded coaches when it comes down to it. And so maybe our worries about having needing an offensive-minded coach because then you can keep the offense the same might be overblown when it comes to that. Man's of World wants us to change this topic here. And again, a lot of people wanting Ben Johnson. I wanted to talk about Raheem Morris a little bit more, but I can't ignore the super chat here from a Man's of World. Can somebody tell me what Johnson has accomplished?
We'll get back to that, right?
Yeah, we'll definitely get back to it. I just wanted to acknowledge it. We'll come back to it there. I definitely wanted to sit here and talk about Raheem Morris more. Trev, you are on the no retread list.
Exactly.
So why would Raheem Morris be a bad idea?
I mean, come on, man. It's a new day. Why are we doing retreads? When he was here at the DB coach, he was bad. When he was in LA, he had Aaron Donald. If I was in LA as in his spot and Aaron Donald, I'd be probably in the same boat as Raheem Morris.
Well, if I was in Kansas City and I was the offensive coordinator, I wouldn't have to do anything either.
No.
I got Patrick Mahomes.
No one can scheme a tight end like Andy Reid. That's ridiculous. But anyways, so what? He went to Tampa Bay and won 12 games in one season. That's cool. Ron Rivera went to the Super Bowl, and we got him. And what happened when he got here? He was gone 4 years later. And those 4 years were not good 4 years at all. They were 8-1, hoping to get in the playoffs at 8-1. Like, it's not We need fresh. We have fresh ownership, fresh GM. Let's get a fresh head coach in here. If you want Raheem Morris so bad, see if he will be cool with being a defensive assistant or offensive assistant or whatever role he is in LA right now. That would be cool. But
Well, he's not going to make a lateral move. Nobody's going to make the lateral move.
Well, then there's no spot for him here. I don't want Raheem Morris, man.
Let me ask
that
this
112 win season doesn't mean anything to me. Outside of that, what else has he done? And it doesn't really matter what you've accomplished. It's how can you coach the game of football? All these different schemes. Nobody said what's DeMeco Ryans accomplished when he got hired down there, and look what he did in his first year, playoffs with a rookie quarterback. So the accomplished thing should be out the window. It's about what can you do for me today, not what you've done in the past, because the past does not matter in the NFL for not for long. So
the question I have for you then, Trev and Nathan, is do you think that sort of attitude or thinking, do you think that would. Or that plays into the minds of the ownership group when it comes to hiring? Do you think that what the fans are going to think about the hire plays into their decision?
Yes.
You do think so?
Not like
a
high percentage, maybe like 2 or 3. It'll be considered if they're preaching about community and what the fans need. If fans need this, they're going to listen a tad bit, not like a chunk percentage, but it's gonna. Yes.
I think the only reason why they would, Stoner, it would be if there was some kind of extra thing. A coach got caught with a DUI or has like a sexual assault record.
No,
that'd be something that they'd be like, is that going to be something that's going to catch some grief? But from the fans, but as far as any of these coaches that we're looking at today, they aren't thinking anything about what the fans think, because they're thinking about how do we win football games, because that's what's going to bring the fans in. And it won't matter if they don't like it because it was a retread.
But the question is, for example, let's just say they got it down to the last 2, and it was Ben Johnson and it was Raheem Morris.
Mm-hmm.
And they absolutely can't figure out which one to hire because they love both of them. They're 1A and 1B, and they can't figure out. Is the deciding factor that they know the fans are not going to like the selection of Raheem Morris?
The deciding factor is probably which coach fits their vision the best. I know that's a vague answer and it's an obvious answer, but if it came down to those 2.
So would you revolt if they decided, if they told you, Trev, they said Raheem Morris fits our vision of the future of the Washington Commanders, we're hiring Raheem Morris to be the head coach? Would you be upset with that?
Yes, but I have to go with it because it fits their vision, and it's they're brand new. I just feels like it's a Dan Snyder move if we went back to Raheem Morris. Okay, that 1 year by himself as a head coach with 12 wins. Outside of that,
I think you got a dollar in the jar for mentioning.
What has he done to prove he can do that again? Being under the wing of somebody else,
I can't believe, Trev, that I'm going to back Stoner on something right now.
It's just a fact. I'm sorry that I do is
the retread thing. So Stoner, oh man, I got rid of the thing. Hold on, let me bring it back. Stoner was saying if you look at the history of Super Bowl winning coaches, how they're retreads. And I was like, that can't possibly be true. I mean, obviously, Andy Reid and Bill Belichick, both second-term coaches who have found success and have dominated over the last few years, but it didn't take very long to kind of get there. So you have Andy Reid, Sean McVay, first-time coach there.
Right.
Bruce Arians was on his second run there. Now that's everyone's going to put an asterisk, Tom Brady and all that kind of stuff, but still a retread coach there for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Of course, Andy Reid, Bill Belichick, Doug Peterson, first-time head coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. Gary Kubiak, he was on a second, and put the asterisks with Peyton Manning. Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, he was on his third team.
Mm-hmm.
He had the Jets for 1 year and the Patriots for 2 years before heading over to USC and then back here and winning a Super Bowl. John Harbaugh, first head coaching gig out there in Baltimore. Tom Coughlin, he was that was not his first team.
Yep.
Mike McCarthy was the first one. Sean Payton was the first one. Mike Tomlin, Tom Coughlin, like we said. Tony Dungy, that was his second team. Bill
But I will
Cowher.
say also that only take Sean McVay and put him as, as the outlier. All of these coaches that you're talking about, even if they weren't retreads, they were older, experienced coaches. That's more what I'm leaning towards.
You want an older, experienced coach rather than.
I do, man.
So what's wrong with having a younger head coach with a brilliant mind, and his coordinators are older, former head coaches, now coordinators? Can you do that? Let's say we get Ben Johnson, then do you bring Raheem Morris? Would you be cool with him being an O coordinator or D coordinator?
He's going to only go for a head coaching position, right? Like, I mean, he's
right,
only.
But he's just saying as an example.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
but 100%, Trev. If they go, let's just say they go with Ben Johnson.
Yeah.
Then 1,000,000,000% they need to have a grizzled veteran for the defensive coordinator. They need to have somebody in there who understands how to operate a football team.
Yes.
A Ron Rivera
type. A Ron Rivera type. I'm not saying Ron Rivera. A Jack Del Rio type. I'm not saying Jack Del Rio. Vic
Fangio, who just left Miami to go to Philly.
Fangio would be perfect.
Yeah.
Gus pointing out Sean McVay did have Wade Phillips as the defensive coordinator.
That's what they have to do if they go that route.
Let's go ahead and switch because I think we've heard enough about Raheem Morris so far. Ben Johnson is the one we're talking about now. He's the favorite. He's the one that people are wanting. He's the one that people are coming out and saying it already. There's NFL rumors. There's radio personalities. Who was it that was who said it today? Was it one of the Sims?
Boomer. No, it's Boomer
Esiason came out and was like, I don't care what his name is. It doesn't matter because he also doesn't know what's going on. He said it was going to be the Admirals.
He did.
One of those others. Okay. 100%. He locked it in, but he locks it in that Ben Johnson is going to be the head coach here for Washington. Stoner, you're saying you need to pair him with a grizzled defensive minded coach, but we had Manza World ask us, I mean, what has he done on his own? Because this is why he's going to get hired. Okay. He's not going to get hired because you're going to pair him with a grizzled vet on the defensive side.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to get hired for what he's done and what he can actually bring, because this is one of those things here. It's not about just what they did. It's about the potential that they've seen in somebody. John Harbaugh, who is still in the playoffs right now and one of the more successful coaches over the last decade, he was a special teams coach and then a defensive backs coach, and then he got hired to be their head coach. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't because he was some amazing defensive back coach. I think he was pretty all right at that to be hired, but it's because the Baltimore Ravens saw him and said, you have the potential to be a great coach here in Baltimore.
Great head coach. Yeah.
A great head coach. So what has Ben Johnson done to be the guy here in Washington?
The biggest thing is all he's done is since he came into the NFL is all he's done is worked his way up. He just keeps getting promoted. He started off as a tight ends coach, and then he went to like a offensive assistant and that quality control coach on the offensive side, QB coach. And then he went to, he was with Dan Campbell when they were in Miami, when Campbell got the interim job there.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't go with Dan Campbell to Detroit, but what he did in Detroit, if you look at how they were as a team and as an offense, is in 2023, they were top 5 in rushing. They're also top 5 in passing. They're also top 5 in scoring as an offense. It was one of the best offensive teams in the league. He got so much out of a quarterback that everybody thought was a retread type quarterback in Jared Goff. He stood on the table and said, we need to draft Jahmyr Gibbs. We need to bring in Montgomery. He improved the play of Amon-Ra St. Brown from a pretty good rookie season into a dominant this particular season. He schemed tight ends open. He had TJ Hawkinson to start turned him into a bit of a star, said, you get out of here. We're going to draft this Laporta kid who had the best rookie tight end receiving in NFL history. All he's done is been successful as an offensive guy. And he wasn't even Dan Campbell's guy. He was here in the previous regime in Detroit. And when Dan Campbell came on, he kept him on as a like a quarterback's coach or something like that. And then Anthony Lynn was, I guess, the offensive coordinator, and that wasn't working out. They got rid of him and said, hey, Dan Campbell said, hey, I'm going to call the plays for a while, but Ben Johnson, I see what you're doing. I want you to be my right-hand guy. And then the next year turns him into OC. And all they've done for the last 2 years has been a dominant offense. So that's what he's accomplished. You can see it everywhere in the stats for the Detroit offense. He's accomplished everything there is basically to accomplish. Can he translate that into a head coach? I don't know, because when you come here, you have to be Ben Johnson in Detroit, and you have to be Dan Campbell in Detroit also when you become the head coach of a team and the offensive coordinator. You're doing everything that Dan Campbell did and everything that you did. Can he do that? I don't know.
I don't know if he can do both. That's why you probably get a seasoned vet for the OC position.
Well, if he comes here, he better be the OC, because that's why you're bringing him here. Ben Johnson hasn't been drawing interest because everybody sees the head coaching potential. He's been drawing interest.
They want that offense.
That offense.
Sure.
And they want his offense, and they want him to lead.
And he bring like one of his offensive assistants, name them the offensive coordinator.
Hank Fraley, right?
Yeah, but also like
Brunell. Is Brunell's quarterback's coach? I think.
Is it Mark Brunell?
I think so.
Is it? I mean, he's a former quarterback, so he knows the quarterback position probably to a T very well, better than Pritchard, who was here, who came from Stanford. And I feel like he's a player's coach. I don't know who said this, but somebody was interviewed about him. They said that. Hold on one second.
Yeah, so I got Ben Johnson. Yeah, Mark Brunell is the quarterback's coach. How about Brunell comes on to be the offensive coordinator for Ben Johnson?
That'd be nuts. But I get the vibe he's a player's coach, and not the Jay Gruden style, like I mentioned earlier. But somebody came out and said that Taylor Decker went to Ben Johnson and was like, hey, they can't stop it if we do this for this scheme and formation. So they ran it 5 times in a row to end the game. A receiver came up and said, hey, they're sitting in the zone. They skinned up 5, So he listens to his players, which I think is a difference when it comes to, I guess, EB and Rivera. It was pretty much mainly EB, his way or the highway. Yeah. And I think that's what riffed the players. But when Ben Johnson comes in, I think he's going to give the players a voice outside of the captains. Like all the way down from the right guard to the third down back to the wide receiver number 4. Like, I think he's going to be that kind of person. I think that's what Washington needs. Someone who's very offensive minded, because we need to score points. We're the laughing stock of the league because we don't score points. We've had good defenses throughout these bad seasons, but we just can't seem to click on the offense side of the ball, no matter how many quarterbacks and running backs and receivers we use. Yeah. So I think I like him because he's young, he's fresh, he's innovative. The game is still growing for him. A lot, if you get these seasoned guys who come in, sometimes the game might have passed them by. They're trying to play catch up. We kind of saw that this year with Ron Rivera. We kind of see that with Bill Belichick. Why he's only
Joe Gibbs 2.0. It was
Joe Gibbs 2.0.
It was
so like
he's still good, but you can tell that it was a little outdated from what was the new.
So if you're looking for a football team that looks like a football team, get Ben Johnson. Like I said, he's a young, innovative, creative mind, players coach. He came from Dan Campbell, who don't take no stuff, so he can probably inherit it from that. If he's getting high praise from Dan Campbell, I mean, he was a former football player with little coaching experience.
I mean, I'll be honest, Trev. I don't want a player's coach. I want
you want a player's coach so the locker room can be on the same page. You don't. I'm not saying Jay Gruden style where you're goofing off, but if you're willing to listen to the players. Not come and just say, hey, listen, this is my way or the highway. I don't care. You want that same attitude, but you also want to be able to give the players a voice in that locker room. That's how the culture is maintained.
Sure.
It's not just about having a winning attitude. It's about coming together as a family, as a brotherhood, and be on the same page and be relatable, where you don't have to go through hoops and hurdles to get to Ron Rivera to ask him a question. You can just go straight to Ben Johnson. You don't have to go through Dan Snyder to get to it because you can go straight to Ben Johnson. Like, that's what I mean by players coach. Someone that can speak the
you don't have to keep those in separate categories.
No.
The players coach and the leader of men,
No,
that could be the same pipeline that you're getting from there. I think that
maybe
that you might have a negative thought of players coach because we had Jay Gruden and we had the purple nurples and the and the stuff like that and think of it like that. But I hear you, Trev, when you're talking about a players coach who is somebody who is approachable, because there's one thing about being a mentor and a leader who can kind of guide you along, but you also have to be, and Stoner, I know you know this as a retired master sergeant, right? You have to have that open door policy, but you can't be a leader who has an open door policy in name only. Players have to be able to approach you, and you have to be able to approach players and talk to them on their level and help them understand it. And I think that's where a younger coach, especially as the game continues to change on an analytic level and the game continues to change at a pace that's much quicker than some of the older coaches are able to handle, that the younger coach might come in here. Now, you make a great point, Stoner, bringing in a grizzled DC who's got experience and all that. My question is, you hire a guy like Ben Johnson. Is Ben Johnson bringing in a defensive coordinator, or are you picking a defensive coordinator as Adams and Harris?
No, I think Ben Johnson has to have a lot of pull in who decide, or who that defensive coordinator is going to be. He's going to get some input, obviously, from everybody else, and it's technically, I think it would be the decision of Adam Peters and his team or whatever that decides that. But I think Ben Johnson has to have most of the input because he's the one that's got to. He's the head coach. He's not just the offensive coordinator. He's the head coach. He's the one that has to speak for the defensive coordinator.
You really think that the DC job comes down to Peters, but it's just he's just gonna really? You don't think if he hires a head coach, he's gonna give them the power to hire whoever?
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that it's going to be Ben Johnson's decision, or it needs to be Ben Johnson's decisions, but Peters is going to have a lot of input on that because he's going to want to say you should probably have this type of guy. I'm not going to tell you that you have to hire Mike Vrabel, but you need to hire a Mike Vrabel type to be your defensive coordinator.
I think we could all probably get, maybe not all, because I know Commander Lorian in the chat, not much love for Mike Vrabel there. But I personally wouldn't mind Mike Vrabel to be paired with a young offensive mind, especially seeing as it's only really going to be for a season or two, especially with a Vrabel type who's likely going to end up with a head coaching job sometime in the next season or two. Ben Johnson, boy wonder. Everyone wants him. Most people are already saying that it's a lock for that to happen here. What about Bobby Slowik? He is another one of the young offensive-minded coaches. He does have some experience with the defensive side of the ball as well. He comes from the Shanahan offense. We saw him take CJ Stroud, a rookie, and he had a phenomenal year. They're in the playoffs. That first game in the playoffs looked great. He ran into another candidate that we'll get here in a little bit, but why Bobby Slowik over Ben Johnson? Why would you go with that route, Trev?
I don't really know much about Bobby Slowik, so to really think I would.
Used to be here in Washington.
Yeah, cool. That's a retread. So I'm just kidding. I don't know. He did a great job with CJ Stroud down in Houston. Got him in the Rookie of the Year conversation. Past 4,000 yards, playoff appearance. But I just don't know too much enough about him, or don't hear enough about him being like a leader of men. Him being, like, was his name in the conversation last year for head coaches?
It was not, because he was not even an OC last year.
Yeah. So great year in Houston. I don't know if he's quite ready to be a head coach after being a 1-year offensive coordinator in Houston. With they made the playoffs and won that crappy division with the rookie quarterback. But a lot of that was D'Amico Ryans, I do believe. But yeah, I'm not impressed. I watched a couple of Texans games and I wasn't impressed. Really, they were good, but nothing really was like, oh man, like he used this player to do that. Like they didn't have the gadget plays that the Lions have, and I guess they didn't have the roster either. So it's kind of hard to really judge because the Houston Texans roster, I think, isn't as good as the Lions. We've seen it already.
And they also won in a poor division.
Right.
So there's a lot of barely won in a sure.
I'm not going to put him over Ben Johnson. I think he needs to sit back and be another OC for another year before he makes.
He could pull a Ben Johnson. Johnson,
but
was somebody who teams wanted, and Ben Johnson last year said,
right.
"Hey, actually, I'm not going to take any head coaching opportunities." And now he's in a position to get, a much better job than he would have gotten last year, in my opinion, with the whole new staff and everything and that excitement and all that kind of stuff. And Slowik might end up trying to do the same if these interviews don't go his way. If the team that he wants isn't available, he might sit that one out. And I think that's something that also comes from the coaches above him saying, hey, I know you want your shot, but don't go for the first opportunity just because you got to go for the right opportunity there. And likewise, you like Slowik?
I like Slowik over Ben Johnson, to be honest.
Wow. I was going to go to you with this, so let's hear it.
Again, and this is just credentials only. I have no idea. They haven't, I haven't sat down and talked to him about how he's going to lead a team. And all that. But the one thing, he's the son of a coach. I like that about a guy. When you're the son of a coach, that means you've been around a coach your entire life. You've been around the game basically your entire life. A professional coach, an NFL coach.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the way he started too, is he started as just a guy who was in the video room when he was in Washington. He was the video guy. He was a guy putting together tape, to scout the future teams and all that. And that's what he did. And then he worked his way up to a defensive assistant here in Washington. And then when the Shanahan regime here in Washington got blown out, he got blown out with him. And you know what he did after that, Trev? He went to PFF and he learned all about the analytics and how to watch film and study players and all this other stuff. He was at PFF for a couple of years. And then when Kyle Shanahan got the job in San Fran, he brought him along, and he didn't want him. He knew his mind was offensive, but he wanted to have him learn the defensive side first. So that's what he did at the beginning, is he learned the defensive side of the ball first, and then he moved him to the offensive side. And then, of course, when D'Amico Ryans went to Houston, he went along with him and became his offensive coordinator and did great things with that team. He's more well-rounded, is what I'm saying, than Ben Johnson seems to be, just in the credential side of it. They're the same age. They've been around the game about the same amount of time, the pro game, but he just seems to have more in his background that makes him more conducive to being a head coach. If I'm hiring an offensive coordinator, there's not even a debate. We just say Ben Johnson, and we don't even debate anybody else. But if I'm hiring a head coach, then I want somebody more well-rounded, who understands the defense a little bit more, who's been around an NFL coach his entire life, his father, a guy who took time away from the game to learn how to study film and how to analyze film and grade film and all of that. That's the kind of guy I want, is a Bobby Slowik.
So nepotism runs deep in the Stoner household, apparently, wanting, the generational talent.
Oh my gosh. Give me somebody's great grandfather who's been around for generations to be the head coach.
Hey, coaching lifers, man, those guys make great players and coaches just because they've been around it forever.
We had somebody point out McDaniels. Tom here was son of a coach, Josh McDaniels. Kind of that same path, didn't work out. I will say kind of one of the bigger things that attracts me to Bobby Slowik, and I would be absolutely thrilled if Slowik was named the head coach here. Okay. He's maybe not my number one choice, but he is somebody I agree with you, Stoner, that he has a lot of traits that are good. One of the things I think that is not admirable, one of the things that you would want to achieve is he has success everywhere he goes, like you said, Stoner, and he's also a part of that Shanahan tree, which was a part of a tree. You say, oh no, Trev, but here's the thing is there are certain coaching trees, and Shanahan, we call it the Shanahan one, but that's really a recent thing because Shanahan came from like the Walsh tree, I believe is where it came from.
Sure.
So like these coaches learned how to win. And we had somebody talk about this in the chat earlier here tonight was players will listen to coaches who win, plain and simple. And Slowik comes from a winning heritage. And so when you come from that heritage, you bring some of that with you, and that's where you get success. So I think that there's probably deeper roots like Stoner you're talking about. Ben Johnson might be a fresher face, but Slowik really does come from winning programs and has success to back it up. So would be a great choice. He's another young one, though, Stoner, that we have to pair with the Fangio or Vrabel and try to see if that would help him, take over the reins and learn those kind of aspects. Someone who would not be needing some kind of elderly statesman would be Dan Quinn.
No,
he is.
No.
I don't know who said it.
Let me finish the saying here. Dan Quinn is an option, but go ahead.
He is an option. I don't know who said it. I can't remember who said it, but there's an understanding out there in the NFL circles, in the coaching circles, that Dan Quinn is 100% the best leader, head coaching candidate available. And it's not even close. He's that type of guy. That's where I lean. I lean towards the coaches, the head coaches who are going to be leaders. That's what I lean to. I think this is kind of in that same category really as Raheem Morris, is that the ownership may not go for a guy like that because they don't think the fans are going to get excited about a retread and about a guy who in his last game gave up 40-something points. I don't remember the score.
In a game that mattered.
At home.
Yeah. So that weighs heavily, and people are going to revolt. A guy coming from the Cowboys, all that stuff. I think there's going to be an issue public relations wise if you hire Dan Quinn. But I think Dan Quinn would be an excellent choice as a head coach.
No.
I think
he just would. He's going to be a head coach.
Bro,
absolutely.
We've had a leader of men like him before, and it doesn't translate to winning games, Stoner. You keep mentioning that's what you want, leader of men. We had that with Ron Rivera for 4 years. Right. He's an absolute leader of men. We just talked about EB being leader of men, but we're like, nah, he's not going to be head coach. I
understand that, Trev, but I can give you 100 guys who are leaders of men who were very successful.
How is Dan Quinn?
Pretty much anyone who's had success is a leader of men as far as the NFL.
Is Dan Quinn one of those?
That's not true.
Is Dan Quinn one of those leader of men who's been successful as a head coach?
Yes, he has. It's a style of leadership. I'm not trying to say that, for example, Dan Quinn would be successful because he's a quote unquote leader of men. I'm not saying that. That's the style of head coach that I think would be successful here in Washington.
We've tried that.
We've tried everything, Trev.
We haven't tried a young fresh mind.
Jay Gruden was a young fresh mind. Jim Zorn was a young fresh mind.
Stop it.
Joe Gibbs was a young fresh mind.
And that one worked out.
I mean, you have to stop comparing it, and you have to start thinking about it in terms of what do you think would work for your team. And if you don't think that's the style, that's great. But I do think
look at that comment right there. Look at that comment right there.
TJ 28-3. Enough said on Dan Quinn.
Hey, that's more on Kyle Shanahan than Dan Quinn. Kyle Shanahan
head coach takes all the blame there.
Kyle Shanahan left up out of there and been the NFC Championship since then.
Mike Vrabel would be a better leader of men if you're talking about needing that leader of men aspect.
Man.
I would
Vrabel
not
would
want
be
somebody in there who's going to raise our voice. So that's what you want.
All
you
you
want
guys-
an old
all-
season voice yeller.
Not you guys. I would just, a lot of people want the Ben Johnson, the Bobby Slowik, the Mike Macdonald. They want that just because they're young and they don't know what they don't know yet. You, as a fan, you don't know what you don't know about Ben Johnson. He could be the next Cliff Kingsbury. He could be the next Josh McDaniels.
He could.
We don't know that yet.
But what we do know is Dan Quinn can't cut it. Raheem Morris can't cut it.
Well,
we already proved that retreads aren't nearly as bad as they might seem.
Yeah.
So I don't want to necessarily go that route. I liked the comments from our people listening to us in the live chat right now. A lot of people in agreement, Stoner, Dan Quinn is going to be a head coach. He's going to be a good head coach for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not a Super Bowl winning coach, but maybe a Super Bowl choker coach for somebody.
Yeah. Got to the Super Bowl.
But it's not going to be here. He's not the right coach for Washington.
I'm okay with that.
And I think that they're right, because I don't think that's what this organization is looking for right now. And it's not because they don't believe in him as a winner. I think that they can see success in the other coaches, and they find something in the other coaches that they can bring to the table that Dan Quinn cannot. Because while he's a leader of men and he has defenses that can be successful, I think that he's not necessarily, again, one of the newer coaches who look at some of the things that in a different way. He looks at them in the way that he understands where he's coming from. He is one of the older candidates on the list. He's not one of the younger candidates. He's somebody who's been around for a long time and is used to doing things a certain way. And they might look at that negatively because eventually the game passes you by. Bill Belichick is still out there. He's only interviewed with the Atlanta Falcons. And right now it looks like the Atlanta Falcons might be going elsewhere.
Yeah, they're going to hire him.
And it's the one that makes most sense. As soon as Harbaugh was listed to the Chargers, Atlanta seems like a lock for Belichick. Now, I do think the reason why we've only heard one publicly going out for Bill Belichick is because there's probably a lot of behind the door stuff where he kind of said, "Hey, this is what I'm looking for," and like just letting certain teams know, like, "Hey, don't bother reaching out," because he's not in the mood for a project. Bill Belichick is. Dan Quinn he's still young enough, he can take a project, but I think he needs to go to a team that's more win now. And that's why I think something like the Seahawks is going to be more his game. Now he's going to entertain interviews wherever because he's looking to be a head coach, but I just don't think it's going to be here in Washington. We're going to go with Caleb's comment here. The conversation should be Ben Johnson or Mike Macdonald. They're 1A and 1B to me. And Caleb, I'm with you. Caleb, because that's my 1A and 1B. Ben Johnson and Mike Macdonald would be fantastic. Either one. Now, I like Slowik, and I actually listed Anthony Weaver as my third option, but Slowik's like right there. What love do you have for Mike Macdonald, Trev, a coach that has been embarrassing the Shanahan tree this year over and over again, has coached the Ravens defense into being a dominant unit yet again? How about Mike McDaniel, who, by the way, I did make our picture for today's candidates. I just kind of wanted something other than Ben Johnson up there. Like I said, I've really, really been loving Mike Macdonald. So much so, I would love a Ravens-Lions Super Bowl just to see those two match up against each other. I would be just absolutely ecstatic if that were to happen. So, Trev, Mike Macdonald.
I like him. I think he's number 2 on my list too, just for what you said. He's beaten to shreds the Shanahan tree, and everybody glows about the Shanahan tree. So why not get someone who can beat the Shanahan tree? He's young. He's a leader of men. He's got nothing but dogs on the defensive side.
I don't know if he's a leader of men.
He's a leader of men.
He's a coordinator of men, but okay,
he's
go
a
ahead.
leader. But there's men on the defensive side of the ball, bro.
Yeah, that's right.
He's a leader of men. I didn't
say.
Okay, he's a leader of at least 11 men on the defensive side of the ball. How about that?
You guys are misinterpreting what I mean by a leader of men. I mean that would they run through a wall for this particular coach?
Yes, bro.
Like, I will say this. Andy Reid, people aren't running through a wall for Andy Reid.
How do you know that?
They're not.
How do you
They're
know
going
that?
to get through the wall because Andy Reid is going to design a way to get through the wall, but they're not going to do it because he's the type of guy who inspires them to. Dan Campbell will get you to run through a wall.
Okay,
even Ron Rivera would.
Look,
it doesn't necessarily equate, but that's what I mean by
these coaches you've mentioned sweat at the podium after the game and raise their voice and have veins popping out. Doesn't mean Andy Reid, nobody's going to run through a wall for Andy Reid just because he's comfortable on the podium and he's talking like, calm and collected.
I appreciate was a player's coach.
Yes.
No, he was not. Joe Gibbs was not a player's coach. Doug Williams is not coming over to Joe Gibbs's house for dinner.
How you know?
Because they're
This is where our definitions are not the same. Our definitions on this are not the same. And when we say leader of men, Stoner, we're not talking about what you're talking about, which is the run through. You want a run through the wall type coach. You want somebody who's going to get your blood boiling and you're just going to do stupid things like run through a wall.
Listen, I want a guy who's going to take that hill knowing he's going to die taking that hill, but he's going to do it anyway because he believes in what his leader is telling him. I'm not saying that's the only way, because look, people aren't going to do that for Andy Reid. Andy Reid's going to do it a different way, and it's going to be successful.
Bro, they're going to do it for Andy Reid.
Trev, I actually agree. They're not going to do it in the way Stoner is approaching it. But Trev, I'm with you that Andy Reid is a leader of the men in my terminology, which is
you guys are misinterpreting my terminology.
And that's why I'm saying you need to change your definition because no one's on your definition. You want to run through the wall coach. Yes. That's what you want.
I want a guy
I like the take the hill coach. Okay. He likes to take a hill coach. And Trev, Stoner's right. Andy Reid's not a take the hill coach. What Andy Reid is a leader of men. He is somebody, and this is my definition here. He is somebody, and I don't know why we're talking about Andy Reid. He's not a candidate, but let's go through the definition here of a leader of men. All right. Because Mike Macdonald, I believe, is a leader of men in the sense that his players want to play for him. His players will listen to what he has to say. His players will do what he has to say, even if they don't necessarily agree with it, but they trust him and his coaching and the understanding that he knows what he's talking about. That's a leader of men. That's something where you have a leader who follows. I get that it's not your Stoner. I get it. You want to take the hill coach. You want somebody who's going to go out there and rah you into a frenzy, and you're going to go out and pummel the other team. That's what you want, and that's okay. But I'm just trying to give you my definition here.
Okay, well, I'm trying to tell y'all your definitions are, when I keep saying leader of men, this is what I mean, right? A leader of men is not a guy who says great googly moogly. Okay, that's not a leader of men. That's a man who will figure out a way to be a successful head coach.
Mike Macdonald,
maybe top 5 greatest of all time. I think that's great, but that's not the type of coach I want for my team. I don't want a guy who gives purple nurples, right? I don't want that type of coach. I watched, this may be a very unpopular opinion again, but I watched some of that in-season Hard Knocks with the Dolphins and Mike McDaniel. I can't stand Mike McDaniel. Everybody loves Mike McDaniel and thinks he's this great coach. He's their buddy. He's their pal. He's their put his arm around you and let's go hang out and have a beer. That's not what a head coach should be. Wow. A head coach should be the guy who inspires you to play well. This is what I always boil it down to. It's 4th and goal, no time left. You're down 5. You have to have a touchdown. A leader of men will get players to go over that line of scrimmage and get over that goal line no matter what. But a player's coach or a offensive mind or an Andy Reid type will design a play to get you across that goal line.
And it works.
Will be completely successful. I agree. I'm not saying you can't be successful in the other way. Andy Reid has proven it, and plenty of people have proven it. But I want my coach to be feared. I want him to be respected. I want people to call him Coach something. I don't want him to go up to Mike Macdonald and say, "Hey, Mike, do you think we should do this?" No. Hey, Coach Macdonald. This is what I think we should do.
Remember the Titans style type.
Yeah, that's what he's looking for.
Yes.
By the way, as hilarious as this is probably to our listeners and Trev right now, I just want to remind people that Stoner at one point in our history was my boss.
True.
My direct supervisor. And so this is just humorous to me.
Right.
To hear this is
but also
you are a player's coach, Stoner, in your definition.
Right. And what did we do for a living?
Well, we're broadcasters. Sure.
Right. If I was an infantry lieutenant or something, or a captain or whatever, you don't want the guy you don't want your infantry captain to invite you over for dinner, because that infantry captain the next day is going to have to tell you to go take that hill, and knowing you're going to die taking that hill. That's the type of guy I want.
All right. Well, in that case, Mike Macdonald fits that, because look what he's done to that Baltimore defense. He's turned them up to be straight up dogs, all pros.
They're definitely awesome.
So, and he's young, innovative, knows what he's got. Yes. Give me him over some grizzly bear.
When I've been looking at the head coaching candidates, seeing what they've been doing and kind of seeing and comparing, because we do have a rebuilding the franchise series that's coming out and starting very soon. And so like we're looking at these kind of things, what the other franchises, the winning franchises have. This is where I have seen that a lot of those winning franchises have defensive minded coaches who are at the top, and they're the ones who are bringing, the mentality that you want, whether or not it's the take the hill mentality or it's the, that my leader of men type thing that they want to play for type, but they're the ones who are being successful. And that's why I'm like, maybe Macdonald should be over Ben Johnson, because of the fact that he might end up being a longer tenured coach, because if things don't work out in like the offense, you're going to get rid of Ben Johnson, right? But if things don't work out on the offense under Macdonald, you get a new offensive coordinator.
Sure.
And the defense, the pieces are here in the defense. Even though you shipped away 2 first rounders, there's still 2 more first round talents on that roster. You have 4 total there still. And so it's just like maybe a defensive minded coach might be good for this team. And this is why maybe they're going to go that route. Maybe that's what, Harris and Adams want long-term, is a defensive minded coach. And I think it'd be wonderful. And again, I am definitely, as much as it pains me to say, I'm cheering on the Ravens. I really want the Ravens and the Lions to meet in the Super Bowl. And then whoever wins that battle, hire them as the coach. Let's go.
I like that. Battle it out on the field. I like Mike Macdonald a lot, looking into his history as well. Again, I don't know sort of what he does in a meeting room and what he does in terms of inspiring people and all of that. But everywhere he's been and everything he's done, all he's done is gotten better and better and better as well. So, and you know what he did when he was in college, which is not play college football. But while he was in college, he coached high school football. While he was in college, while he was a student at Georgia, he coached for 3 years in high school, defensive backs, and as a defensive assistant coach in an area high school. And then he went to Georgia, right? He went to the Ravens, started off as an intern, worked his way up. He was 33 years old when he was the Michigan defensive coordinator. That was just a few years ago. And he took their defense and took it all the way up to a top 10 in the country type defense. And then he came back over to the Ravens to be their defensive coordinator the last couple of years. And all they've done, as Trev said, they've just been dogs, and they've been a really good defense. Look at what he's done this year. Now, he learned under Wink Martindale. We all love what Wink Martindale does. And by the way, Wink Martindale, did he? Yeah, he's out there, right? He's still one of those great defensive coordinators.
He would probably want to come here just so he can stick it to the Giants.
Right. He learned under Wink Martindale and Todd Grantham, of course, working under Harbaugh at Michigan. But look what he's done this year with the teams. I looked at all the playoff teams that they played this year. They offensively, they averaged 15 points per game against the Ravens. We were talking about the Texans twice, who scored a total of 0 touchdowns in the 2 games that they played this year. Yeah. This is Bobby Slowik run offense, right?
Yeah,
0 touchdowns in 2 games. To include in the playoff game, they didn't even make it into the red zone. That offense didn't. And so they 0 touchdowns did against the Lions, held the Lions to 6 points, held Justin Herbert to 10, Trevor Lawrence to 7, the 49ers to 19, the Dolphins to 19, 2 prolific offenses. All he's done is shut down the best offenses in the league this entire year. That's what impresses me about Mike Macdonald. Again, I don't know how he is in terms of leading an entire football team, but his record is pretty impeccable as a defensive guy. I'd love Mike Macdonald as,
like I said,
a defensive coordinator. I don't know about head coach. We'll see.
Oh, come on. He'd make a fantastic head coach. I have Anthony Weaver in my top 3, but I have to admit I've been not souring on him, but kind of distancing. Maybe it's just because I think we're in a position to get one of those top 2 coaches.
Yeah.
Anthony Weaver, I think is going to be fantastic. I think that he might not make it through the head coaching round this year. And I do think that him and Aaron Glenn, who's being mentioned as well, we'll kind of put them together, because I know Trev's going to have to bail here in just a little bit before we get to that mock draft in the cool down. Aaron Glenn, Anthony Weaver, do you guys have anything to say about them? Because I think it would be a true surprise to see either one of them as the head coach.
I don't think either one will get hired to be a head coach anywhere right now, to be honest. Not with the teams that are looking to have head coaching openings. No offense to them, but I just don't see Anthony Weaver being a defensive line coach, jumping from that up to a head coach. Aaron Glenn, I don't know. So,
I'm not sure if he's ready yet. I mean, he might be.
Right,
Aaron Glenn's kind of up there, so.
I think what would be perfect is if Mike Macdonald came over as the head coach, but brought Weaver over as his defensive coordinator, right? Which is not a huge leap for Weaver to go from defensive line coach.
He is, I think, the assistant. He's an assistant head coach.
Line coach.
Yeah.
I mean, and he's done wonders with a defensive line who, in preseason, the Washington Commanders' offensive line dominated that defensive line. So he's done wonders with them because they've been very good this year. But do that and then bring over as an offensive coordinator. How about this? Who's the quarterback's coach for the Ravens? T. Martin. How about have him be your offensive coordinator? Or here's a name for you that blew me away in this little research, right? The running backs coach for the Ravens, Willie Taggart. You know who Willie Taggart is?
They got studs over there.
Willie Taggart was the head coach at Florida State and the head coach at Oregon.
Yes.
Willie Taggart is super overqualified to be a running backs coach.
Yeah, they got studs.
Bring him for the offensive coordinator. I mean, he was a great quarterback in college at Western Kentucky. All kinds of. Just bring the whole Ravens over. Mike Macdonald, Anthony Weaver, and Willie Taggart is your OC.
Unfortunately, it's not time for the segue, but I almost want to use this one right now. But if you bring over, Taggart and that Ravens offense, that would be perfect for Mel Kiper's mock draft 1.0 as he picked Jayden Daniels, who a lot of people, kind of say is a little bit like the MVP candidate for this year. Now, again, I would have been a perfect segue, but I can't segue out of the coaching candidate section right now because Mike hit us with a $10 super chat here. And so we appreciate you, Mike. And so you did stop a perfect segue into the next segment, but I still appreciate it because he needs us to vote right now. What's the next head coach? All right. We're going to start with you, Stoner. You are in the room with Adams and you're beating your chest. You're taking that hill, Stoner.
Oh, no.
Are we asking who I want or who do I
vote?
predict?
Who is going to be the next head coach?
I mean, Ben Johnson is, I'd put him at 90% that he's going to be the next head coach.
But he's not the head coach that you want.
But I'd be perfectly happy with him. But it's just not who I would choose. I'm fine with going with a young offensive mind first time. Let me just say that. Just not what I would do. So I would say Ben Johnson is, look, JP Finley is very connected within the organization, and he talks in code sometimes, and he's been talking in code that Ben Johnson is going to be the head coach here. So I will take that because when he does that, he's saying it without saying it.
Easy money, says Stoner. Who do you want?
Of those candidates that are out there now?
Yeah, because Jim Harbaugh was your number one. He's He's with the Chargers.
Yep. Raheem Morris.
Okay.
That's who I would want. He's my number one, but he's not going to be.
No. All right, Trev, before you leave for the night, who's going to be the next head coach for the Washington Commanders?
I'm going to get my take on Jayden Daniels too before I leave, but for right now, the coach, Ben Johnson. I mean, it's everybody in the entire world except for the organization knows it's Ben Johnson. It seems like
just waiting to announce it. Let him get through his Super Bowl run, and then you can announce it.
But we don't know Adam Peters from the next guy because he's brand new. We don't know Josh Harris. I mean, just because they've worked together and this and that doesn't mean necessarily going to do it again.
Sure.
They could, surprise us all and go Mike Macdonald. So obvious it's Ben Johnson, but dark horse, nobody sees coming, Mike Macdonald.
Yeah, again, either one of those, that'd be good. But who did you want? Who do you want? You
Ben
want
Johnson.
Ben Johnson?
Yeah. He's
Ben Johnson
He's
guy?
the shiniest toy, and I'm all about shiny toys this season. So
sure.
I laid it out. I'm a 1A and 1B, Johnson and McDonald. I'd be happy with either. It is going to be Ben Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
But the more and more I'm looking at him, the more and more I'm just saying, man, McDonald is going to be, he's going to be good. He's going to be good. Like I said, let them get to the Super Bowl, duke it out. The winner gets to be the head coach here. The loser stays a coordinator for another year, has to wait for the next job out. So we appreciate you, Mike, with that super chat donation. We voted. It is going to be Ben Johnson here for ref the district. Trev, you got to leave us. You said you want to give the JD information here. Roger calling him a version of Randall Cunningham. What do you have to say? Because you're out on Jayden Daniels.
I've kind of come around to him the more he's been linked to us, number two, and the more he's been talked about. I mean, he did just win the Heisman. Yes, Caleb won last year, but Caleb's going number one overall. That's just bottom line. Drake Maye, I think he's Sam Howell 2.0, to be honest, even though I am a Carolina fan. I think he's following the same route. He was better his junior year than he was his senior year, just like Sam Howell was. He couldn't even get out the ACC with an 8-4 record. Jayden Daniels, last 2 years, remember he played 5 years college ball. His last 2 years at LSU were pretty good, so I'm just going to judge off that because the SEC is the most NFL-ready conference in college football. 2022, 14 games, 266 completions out of 388 attempts, 68.6%, 17 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Awesome. This past Heisman season, he threw 30 less pass attempts, or completed 30 less pass attempts with 236, and threw for less pass attempts at 327. He was 236 for 327 this past season at 72.2 completion percentage, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Talk about the frame all you want. I'm so tired of hearing about small hands and he's so skinny and stuff. It happens. Okay, it's the NFL. Doesn't mean you can't make it. Okay, I'm so sick of.
I think he's
hearing that.
comparable in weight at least to Lamar Jackson.
And look what Lamar's doing. Everybody thought he'd get cream. Yeah, he takes a lot of hits. He has some injury history, but look where he is now after he got a few years under his belt. I like Jayden Daniels. If we do take a quarterback at 2, I would, and it can't be Caleb. I'd go Jayden Daniels just based off his SEC performance alone. Forget the Pac-12 stuff. He can bulk up. He's electric. He can throw the deep ball. 40 touchdowns in the SEC and 4 interceptions in the SEC is pretty impressive, win or lose. He threw for 6 touchdowns in one game, put up 42 points against Texas A&M, 52 against Stoner's Florida Gators. Like, the man can ball. He won the Heisman for a reason. So if we took him at number 2, I'd be happy. Let's roll, get some weapons, and let's do it. Jayden Daniels number 2. I'm cool.
Don't forget about his 1,100 rushing yards in the SEC and 10 more touchdowns.
Didn't even see that. So that just adds up to.
He had a stellar year. I mean, he earned the Heisman.
Let's do it.
He did. He did everything. I hate to burst the bubble before you go, Trev.
What?
But Mel Kiper is not exactly he might be a draft guru, but he's not exactly Nostradamus. He's not,
but it's a logical future. The pick is logical.
Sure.
He hasn't taken a quarterback, and he hasn't taken the top 3 quarterback in the draft in Jayden Daniels. It might not be him, might be Drake Maye, because if we get Ben Johnson, Carolina connection, blah, 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 blah.
All sorts of it is early,
yes,
and we're here to talk about it.
I'm cool with it. I'm cool if we get Jayden Daniels number 2.
All right, Trev, thank you kindly. When we come back for the cool down, we will be talking about that Mel's Mock 1.0. Stick around with us. Mel Kiper, draft guru for ESPN, released his mock draft 1.0. And we had Mike ask us earlier in this, where are some new spreadsheets, guys? Well, I did one. It's not as sexy as the previous one. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles. It's probably not worth necessarily sharing, but I absolutely broke down Mel Kiper's last 10 years worth of top 5 picks, because that's where Washington's picking. And I wanted to see his success rate. I wanted to see how it would go, because I know this is going to devolve into a Jayden Daniels conversation. I get it. I know that's what everybody wants to talk about. But me personally, I wanted to kind of point to kind of how a mock draft in January is almost fool's gold. Okay. And Doug, you're absolutely right. Mocks are really just to get familiar with who's out there. And right now, that's what we need to be doing this with. It's not necessarily that Jayden Daniels is going to come here, and we'll talk about some reasons why, but it is just kind of like, hey, and John Keim said this before as well. It's not about the name, it's about the position. Who over and over again, who are the positions you're seeing? And right now we're going to see QB in every which way. I'm sorry, Howlers. I know that you want to believe in Sam Howell and think that we shouldn't get there, but Jayden Daniels may or may not be the next QB, but it looks like there is going to be a QB taken. Now, let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and do this. And I have this spreadsheet, and we can work on sizing and everything else like that here. But let me take off the branding real quick. So this is super small, and so I'm going to try to increase it just a bit, see if this works here. Stoner, is that showing up? Because I'm on the screen right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's showing up. You have just the left side right now.
Yeah, that's fine. I can move it over to the right, because what we're looking at here on the screen right now are the actual draft picks with the year that they were taken. Again, it was the last 10 years that were available. Maybe I need to scroll down. No, it's all of them. So yeah, the last 10 years. Did I get that right? It doesn't matter. We're just going to continue rolling with it here. Yep. Mel Kiper was right on the ones that are shaded green if you're watching us, on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. So if you're listening to us on your favorite audio platform, we appreciate you doing so. He only hit on about 20% of the time. 20% of the time he picked the right player at the right pick with his initial mock draft. And that's what I kind of wanted to talk about, because when you're talking about going super early You're talking January, at the end of January, when the draft is in April. It is extremely hard to sit there and guess the future. And Mel Kiper in all of his articles will say he can't predict trades. He's not going to be able to see people moving up and trading. If the Chicago Bears decide they're sticking with Fields and they move back, that he doesn't know who's going up there. It's going to be Caleb Williams more than likely, but someone had commented, some of the simulators right now are going Jayden Daniels 1 overall. And people have started to try to make arguments, and we're going to see this over the next few months, is why it won't be Caleb Williams, why Drake Maye deserves to be 1-1, why Jayden Daniels deserves to be 1-1. We saw this, Stoner, back in 2012 with RG3. RG3 had worked his way up, having had a good college career. He then gets into the Heisman conversation, wins a Heisman, and all of a sudden he is in the conversation of beating out who everyone knew to be a generational talent in Andrew Luck. And they were thinking maybe Indianapolis takes RG3 and Andrew Luck falls to number 2. And so Washington moved up early for the pick because they didn't care. They're like, we're going to get one of these guys because one of these guys is going to make our franchise successful. Sorry, it didn't, but that's what they did. So what comes into it for you as far as these mock drafts this earlier? This isn't you and me doing it either. This is somebody who has years in the business. This is somebody who listens to the scouting departments. This is somebody who has probably his own scouting department. So what value do you put into Mel's first mock?
I mean, I don't put a whole lot of value really into a lot of people's mocks because it is just kind of a guessing game, because they don't really know what these teams are thinking. They can look at a team on paper and say, this is what a team needs most, and so I'm going to mock that best player there. And that's usually how most of these go, because these college players haven't done the combine, haven't done the individual testing, the pro days. They haven't had all their interviews and all the
no Senior Bowl, no nothing like that yet.
They haven't had any of that stuff yet. And that's where really teams start figuring out who it is that they're going to draft. So, I mean, we can all do a mock draft right now and probably be just as accurate as Mel, because we're just looking at what a team needs. But so much changes between now and then. So I don't look at the mock drafts now as much as I do when you're about 2 or 3 weeks away from the actual draft, when these insiders, and they are insiders, when they talk to the teams and start getting a feel for what these teams are going to do. But right now, you're just looking at Washington needs a quarterback. I think Jayden Daniels is the best one left over after Caleb Williams. So I'm going to mock Jayden Daniels to Washington at number 2. And I don't even know who he has at 3, 4, and 5, but those 3, 4, and 5s are not going to be probably 3, 4, and 5 when it comes time.
Well, so it is, by the way, Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, then it's Drake Maye to the Patriots, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Brock Bowers filling this one out at number 5 there.
Who's 5?
5 was Brock Bowers. Chargers was the team there.
Yeah,
so
that makes a lot of sense.
So I actually do have to kind of disagree with you a little bit when you're saying like he's not going to be good, because Brian, pointing out that Kyper actually does have a good track record. I mentioned that he's only hit on 10 of those 50
What's
picks.
a good track record mean?
So, I mean, for a draft, and the draft is already a crapshoot. What a track record means to me, as far as a good track record, is that he's picking guys in the area that they're going to be picked, that he has correctly identified team needs and where the player evaluation of where they're going to go.
Okay, but what I mean is
20% is pretty decent, because it's really big for January.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying is
January
20 hitting on 20%. That seems pretty good to me. Could you correctly predict where all of them are going? It's no arbitrary than take the hill, Stoner. You want to go back over that one again?
No, I mean, like, how come 75% is not a good track record?
I think that'd be outstanding. If you're able to, I mean, you should definitely be at the casino. If you can tell me 75% with the 75% accuracy, who's being picked and where they're being picked.
But that's what I mean. You're just throwing out and you're saying 20% is good. Well,
I'm saying that
why is 20% good?
It's not it doesn't seem to be a negative. I think that it's not as good as it's not great.
Don't test and see what happens.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. It's not great, but it's
that's
probably better.
It's
probably better than what most people, would do. Now it does tell me don't put a lot of stock into this first mock draft.
Yeah.
As far as like, don't get your hopes up. It's going to be Jayden Daniels. This is just his initial, hey, I've read through the player profiles. I've read through the team profiles. This is where I feel they're going to go. And so he hits on it 20% of the time. Now, the other side of the coin here is his first mock drafts. Okay. And so let me bring those up again for everybody. So this side of the spreadsheet, the empty slots were the ones that he already got. Okay. Those were the ones that he picked the team or the spot and the player correctly. So these are the rest of the players here. The yellow ones in front of you are the ones who were not taken within the top 5. And the green ones were ones that were taken the top 5 because I wanted to see kind of his hit success rate when it came to the top 5. Because again, Washington's picking the top 5. Maybe they don't get the player he's listed in the first one, Jayden Daniels, but maybe they're still getting a top 5 pick from what he suggested was going to be, a top 5 pick. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think for the most part. But if I did a top 5 right now, I bet you I could be just as accurate as Mel Kiper.
All right, we're gonna have to see it. Let's go ahead. We'll give you some time. You don't have to do it right here on air.
All right.
But I mean, he did hit on nearly half of the top 5. Now, the one name that surprised me the most in hindsight, I do remember Jonathan Allen here was supposed to be a top 5, a top 10 pick. He ends up falling to Washington in the teens. But like he was one there. I mean, you have Jamal Adams, you have some good names there. Randy Gregory had a good career. Leonard Williams is good. So I mean, Devontae Smith at 2, and doesn't go there. He went later. But I mean, you do have teams picking in those kind of in those range. And I do think, Stoner, that it's not necessarily a gimme that you're going to be able to pick those. One, I'd say Brock Bowers probably isn't going to be picked in the top 5.
Right. He's not.
I would be very surprised if that would happen. A lot of people are going to mock him that way. And a lot of people are very high on Bowers going there, but hitting on nearly 50% of the top 5 in January, when there's still all that stuff, the Senior Bowl,
right,
all that, I still think is a decent hit rate right now. So I would start looking. We know that these were already the names because at 2, you don't have to go very deep. Okay.
Right.
You're probably not going to be, looking at, you probably, a lot of players might, or a lot of fans might want Joe Alt or something like that, but you're not going to be necessarily looking at Neighbors, who is the wide receiver out of LSU, because you're like, they're not taking him at 2. He's mocked currently to the Giants at 6, and that's a desperation pick right there.
No, Neighbors is the real deal.
Well, I'm saying it's because the Giants need wide receiver help. They don't have anybody.
Well, yeah. So they're not drafting best player available, right?
I mean, I haven't gone through enough.
They're drafting.
This is trying to avoid as much of the draft talk as possible. It's gonna get there.
Who's it
Olu
for?
goes to 10th. For what we talked about, whose 4 was. It was Marvin Harrison Jr.
Not the player, the team.
Atlanta. Or not Atlanta, sorry, Arizona.
Arizona. Okay, well, that changes things. Because I've already got my
You've already got it?
Yeah.
All right. You're gonna have to write this one.
I'll write it down
for us.
New England's moving up to 1 to take Caleb Williams.
That's not happening. But
okay. Washington is taking Jayden Daniels.
Okay.
At 3 is now Chicago. They're taking Marvin Harrison Jr. At 4 is who again? I've already forgotten. You just told me.
Arizona.
Arizona. Arizona is taking Neighbors. And at 5 is Atlanta. Chargers. Okay. Yep. So, and the Chargers are going to take, I was going to say Fashanu, but they don't need a left tackle. They've got a good one already. They don't need a receiver and they don't need a quarterback. I'll go. Bowers is a good pick there.
Bowers
is a good pick.
Dallas Turner is at 8 for the Atlanta Falcons.
No, that's where Drake Maye's going.
Okay.
Drake Maye is getting drafted by the Falcons. However, they can figure it out. That's where he's going.
What I'm saying is Dallas Turner for an option for the Chargers, but that's your top 5. You write it down. You'll see how successful you are compared to Mel in his first mock draft. Don't get married to the name. Don't fall in love with Jayden Daniels here in January and then later find out that he has some fatal flaw because you haven't watched the tape yet. I got to watch a lot of tape. I've got to sit there and go through, see, some of the pro scouts and some of the people who've been there and what they've said and how to look at certain things. Thanks to Sam Howell, if I've learned one thing to kind of look at for Sam Howell is going to be his sack rate. I'm going to be very, very aware of how many sacks the player has taken and how many of them he's been responsible for and those kind of things. I will say this, Jayden Daniels wasn't sacked very much.
Nope.
Okay. He was, and he's in the SEC, and that level of competition is worth looking at. Now, Grimjaw and several others like Yam don't want RG4.
Well, don't worry. He's not anywhere close to that.
How is he not RG? How can you assuade these people? How can you make sure that these people, if we pick Jayden Daniels at 2, like Mel Kiper has us picking, let's switch into the QB talk here. How can you make them feel better about that pick?
Well, I mean, if you're going to compare him to RG3 was a track star, where RG3 is a straight ahead, fast runner in that manner. Jayden Daniels is not that type. He's got the quick twitch, right? He can dance and move around when he needs to. The only downside, let me just say this about Daniels. The only downside that I've seen so far is his frame. Okay. But I can give you 100 examples of thinner quarterbacks being successful, and he can fill that out as he grows. And the two, and I can't get past this because you know how I am about leadership qualities and everything, is his suit at the Heisman presentation, he had pictures of himself. Okay, I didn't like that, but that doesn't. I don't care as long as you throw touchdowns and win football games. But that's a little bit of a red flag for me. But in just what I've seen,
I know we're both older than the young kids, but that is such a boomer thing to focus on. I didn't like 100%. The suit he was wearing. Okay, does it have anything to do with his capabilities?
Pictures of himself. He's a
RG me. A lot of people called him RG me. Sure,
absolutely. As opposed to Penix, who had pictures of his teammates or names of his teammates, whatever it was. That just screams, red flag. But not enough of a red flag where I wouldn't draft him. But all he's done in his career, in his 5 years of college football, by the way, which I love. I love guys who play a lot of college football.
That's Parcells who had the Parcells. One of the coaches came up with a formula for taking a QB, and I want to say it was Parcells. Might be wrong. Someone's going to correct me in the chat there. I'm sure of it. It was, but one of the things was you want a 4-year starter.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the kind of guy I want, who's had a lot of experience, and all he's done is gotten better and better and better. And it culminated in this season when nobody was really talking about him. And he had a season comparable to Joe Burrow's Heisman winning season as well. And
without
he did it in
Jamar
the
Chase. I mean, of course, everyone's loving Neighbors right now too. But
but he had 50 total touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 72% completions, had 1,100 yards rushing. All of these things. And when you just watch the tape, and we, like you said, we haven't kind of studied the tape, but he's not a first read guy. That's RG3 was a first read guy. He's not a first read guy, and he throws guys open, and he's got the arm strength. He's got the be able to move around the pocket and get outside the pocket, run when he needs to. I haven't seen any flaws in his actual game. The only flaws we're talking about is that he's too skinny and that he's an RG meat guy kind of guy. That's it. That's all I've seen that has scared me about him.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't deny what he's done, what you see on tape, and then you can't deny just looking at the numbers. 72% completion percentage in college football in the SEC. I don't care who your receivers are. That's a ridiculous accuracy, and it's not dinking and dunking the ball all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
He's throwing, there's terms we put out there, missiles,
yards per attempt, and all that other stuff
are out
higher,
there.
Sure.
The stuff you see on tape is super impressive.
Mm-hmm.
And again, all he's done is gotten better and better over the course of all those years. The year before, he had 17 touchdowns and 3 picks. His first year at Arizona State, he had 17 and 2. He's not a turnover kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
What's not to like? That he's a little bit thinner than some of these.
He's really it. He's a taller QB. People have been asking for.
Yeah,
it.
He's the same height as Drake Maye, but Drake May's got him by like 25 pounds, and that means something. But that's not something that you would say, I can't pin my future on a guy because he doesn't weigh enough as a quarterback, especially. So that's just me. I mean,
I think people, especially here in Washington, they fear the worst. They've seen it happen with a running QB. They don't want to go down that road again. They're broken, Stoner. They're hurt.
Sure.
And so they don't want to get hurt again. I do think the fear of being injured is a little overblown. I think that this is football. It's a contact sport. Players are going to get injured. You can't predict it on that. You've got to take it off of that potential that you see there. Do you see more potential in Jayden Daniels or Drake Maye? That's the question that Adams and Ben Johnson, who we've said is going to be the coach, are going to have. That's going to be the question. They're going to sit down. They're going to talk with their front office staff, which we still have not seen much movement on that. Tommy was calling it out earlier. We still have the Martys. We still have the same scouting. There's a lot of things that haven't turned over yet. That might change once things get going on the head coach thing, but they're going to have to sit down and say, who do they want? And hopefully they don't get locked in either. Right. Because we saw Ron Rivera get locked in wanting Emmanuel Forbes. Another player drops to it, but they were like, Emmanuel Forbes is our guy. We're taking him. And we do want them to take their guy, but they've also got to scout the other guys to be like, hey,
they got to be.
If Caleb Williams falls to 2, you can't just be like, well, I really wanted Jayden Daniels, but Drake Maye went number 1, and now I'm like, oh, I guess, we shouldn't take Caleb Williams. Bill Parcells, G's outside helped me with that one. It was Bill Parcells, and so I did look it up. These are the Parcells rules.
Attempts.
Yep, 4-year player, 3-year starter, college graduate, 30 career starts, 23 career wins, 60% completion percentage, and a 2-to-1 passing touchdown to interception ratio.
How about 89 touchdowns to 20 picks?
Seems pretty good, Stoner.
Yeah. What was the other one? How many games?
30 career starts with 23 career wins. I actually have it over for you right here. Okay. Jayden Daniels. Somebody did the work for us here. 5-yard rush, a UK site. Shout out to our fans and listeners across the pond there for the Parcells rules. 4-year player, Jayden Daniels. Yes. College graduate. He graduated at ASU. Yes. 3-year starter. Yes. 30 career starts. He started 43 games. So yes. 23 wins. He won 28 games. 60% completion percentage across his career. He actually has a 64.5. And a 2-to-1 touchdown ratio, yes, 49-16. So absolutely smashes that. And he passes the Bill Parcells test.
I don't know where they got them stats because them stats are like way off, but okay.
Let's see when this article was. Oh, okay. So it was probably because this was all the way down in August of 2023. So this didn't even include his final year.
Yeah, that was before his final year.
But still, shout out.
That's what I was wondering. I was like, he had more starts.
The stats are lower, yeah.
But that's all right. I mean, the point is, even before his senior year, he had already surpassed all of those Bill Parcells type levels in order to be considered as your starting quarterback. Listen, there's no quarterback that's coming out as perfect other than, I mean, Caleb Williams, I think, is pretty close to perfect personally.
It's exciting. Yeah.
I think people who are questioning drafting him number 1 overall are crazy. I think he's the real deal. I think he's a generational type guy who's going to be good for a long time. But everybody else, you're going to have questions about him. You're going to have doubts about him. You're going to be able to pick holes in his game. It doesn't matter who it is. You're going to find that. And so they have to decide if those holes are something that they can fix or that they can scheme around or whatever it is. And if so, then that's where they're going to go ahead and make the selection at number 2. I think Jayden Daniels is the guy at number 2 for me.
He's been somebody I'm most excited about watching his tape. I'll say that. I've seen highlights of all the top players. I've seen a couple of games here and there. I've seen Drake Maye games, and I've seen Jayden Daniels games. I told you before RG3 was taken, I told you I liked him. I was like, this guy's a stud. If Washington ends up with him, we've got the guy. Of course, it didn't work out. Large part of that was injury. Then some of it was that attitude. But there's something about a player that pops off the screen. And there's something about Jayden Daniels for me that just, you take that Hill comment earlier. Okay. There's something about my blood getting boiling because of the player just doing something. They have that it factor, and Jayden Daniels has a it factor. I think Drake Maye is a solid QB. He could be Justin Herbert, but it's just not. He hasn't really done much for me, but I want to watch some more tape on that. Mike with another super chat here. $2 this time. I'm not sure what he's talking about with it ashes that, but he made a comment earlier that I wanted to bring up because you and I don't seem to be with the fan base that suggests that Washington trade back. And Mike H was saying trade back. And we've seen several other comments tonight saying, don't take a QB. Don't reach for Jayden Daniels or reach for Drake Maye. Trade back, get yourself a left tackle, and then get one of the JJ McCarthy's, the Penix, the Bo Nixes.
Nope.
You're already shaking your head. Why is that? One, tell me why we don't do that. We shouldn't do that. And then try to explain to me why people want that, because I get that there's a roster that we need filling, but we do not ever want to be back in the position to be picking a QB in the top 5, top 3.
Right. You may never get this opportunity again to have the 2nd overall pick in a quarterback draft class of 3. When you look at draft classes and you say, well, this particular draft class is a class of 3, or it's a 2, or if you remember just a couple of years ago that there wasn't any top 5 picks that anybody was willing to go get. That was Sam Howell's draft, where Kenny Pickett was the highest one at like 18 or whatever it is.
Sure.
For the Steelers. That was not one of those. But this year is a 3 quarterback class, and Jayden Daniels is there, or Drake Maye. You're not going to get this opportunity to be the 2nd. You know how bad you have to be the 2nd overall pick? Well, we just witnessed it. And we barely got to the 2nd overall pick and had to lose 8 games in a row. Was it 9? I don't remember.
8.
Was it 8?
I think it was 8. At least it was 8 at one point. It might have been more.
Do you know how hard it is to lose 8 games in a row, regardless of how bad you are? It's very difficult to do that. So you're not going to be in this position again. So you cannot go for a guy who is a second round or a third round graded type quarterback and hope that he works out. You're in the position right now. You're going to marry up a head coach, a GM, a head coach, an offensive coordinator, and a quarterback. This is the year to do it. You can't keep saying, well, let's wait till next year. We did that for a couple of years. We kept saying, well, let's wait for Tua. Let's tank for Tua. Or let's wait for this guy. And then it was, let's wait for Caleb. And then you get to this draft, and now you're like, well, let's wait for the next one. Let's stop doing that. You have to go for it right now when you're in the position to do so. And so they have to take a quarterback. And by the way, they will take a quarterback. That's a lock. That's a 401k type bet. They are taking a quarterback in the top 5.
It's a no-brainer.
Trading back a couple of spots, but not out of the 3 quarterback running. They're not doing that.
I think there's just too much risk to trade back.
Yeah,
if you want a QB, you got to take the QB you want at 2. And some people might say Jayden Daniels is a reach and that you could have had him at 8. But here's the thing. You move back. One, the team that you're trading with is going to take a QB.
Right. They're not moving.
Then New England is going to take a QB.
Right.
And now you're at the position where you're taking the people been complaining about taking when we were going to pick 3. They're like, oh, we're going to get the 3rd best quarterback. Now at picking, 4 or 5 or 6 or whatnot, now you're looking at picking the 4th best quarterback.
Yeah.
And that's the trouble, especially when I know that they're going to eye these QBs. Now, if they don't like the QBs and they trade back, then that's another thing. And we're going to have to trust them. We're going to be mad on draft day if that's what happens.
They're not
going. We'll be super excited for the first time ever. Ref the District's live draft watch party is going to be, waiting a whole 20 minutes. They won't take Stoner, put this one down. They will not be taking a commercial before Washington's pick. For the first time in years,
right,
that we won't have a commercial as like Washington's getting ready to pick.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I really, it baffles me how many people want that. You got to understand, like, the further back you get in the draft, the higher that number is, the more you're gambling on that player being successful.
Mm-hmm.
Hitting on a late round it's astronomical. You got to think of how many 7th rounders play in the NFL for how long, and you happen to get one of the 125 every year that just happened to be a 4-year starter. Cam Curl is an anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That was a fantastic pick, but that's not the norm. The norm isn't even James Smith-Williams.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The norm is
the same thing. James Smith-Williams is not even an anomaly. And
that's above average.
Yeah.
That's an above average pick for a 7th rounder. Most 7th rounders are out within less than a couple of years. The average NFL career is less than 4 years, if I recall correctly.
It's less than 3, I think. I think it's 2.
Yeah, I think it was like right around 3.
Yeah.
But it's the whole thing is a crapshoot, and the further back you go, the more of a crapshoot it is. So I just don't understand the trade back. I can understand when you were picking 7th, right? Before things got super, super bad, right? And then I can understand when you're 16 and you're just trying to get a couple extra picks at in that same kind of span, because the difference between pick 23 and 34, not that significant.
Right.
Okay. But the difference between pick 2 and pick 6
is massive.
It's miles.
Can
be absolutely miles and miles apart.
You can't miss your chance to take a shot at a quarterback at this point. You can't say build everything up around and then go get a quarterback. Well, who is that? Who is all of a sudden going to become available that you can just plug into this team? And you can't sit there and say, well, so-and-so is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. For example, I don't know who it is, who next year, who the free agents are, or we can't even talk about who the college quarterbacks are right now that are going to be studs in the next draft. Because before this year, we weren't talking about Bo Nix. He was terrible. We weren't talking about Jayden Daniels because he wasn't that great last year. He was good.
He had a much better
about,
season than people thought, and that was something that I have been looking through. Everyone looks at the box score stats and they're like, oh, he only threw 17 touchdowns. And it was just like, you got to look at more than the box score stats.
Absolutely.
And from what I've seen, that's one of the reasons why I'm getting excited about Jayden Daniels, because even last year, even though statistically he wasn't there, his play style was, and he was, and there was things there. So sorry to interrupt you there. I just was
that's all right. No,
maddening.
Good. Yep. You got the chance right now at number 2. You can't squander it by saying, well, let's just get one next year. It's just not that easy. And it's not that easy to come around to the number 2 pick again, especially when there's 3 quarterbacks that are considered franchise quarterbacks right now.
You do not want to be doing this every 5 years like Washington has with a Chase Young and now potentially Jayden Daniels, according to Mel's mock 1.0. We are going to be deep diving into the different players. We'll take a look at Caleb Williams in case he comes down. We'll have a video about him. We're going to have a video about Jayden Daniels, and we're going to actually break down some of what we see. And there's going to be more spreadsheets coming as we go along. Before we get to those draft videos, those player profiles, we do have a series coming out, Rebuilding a Franchise. First up is going to be Owner, Stadium, and You. That's part 1. That will be releasing within the next week. We're getting back into schedule here. We needed a little break after a busy off season, but we do have some more recorded content. When there's relevant news, we will bring you a Commanders update as well. If it's big news, like when Ben Johnson gets hired, that'll be a breaking news out a little bit earlier than a Commanders update in that regard. But trust us, good content coming your way here on Ref the District. You just have to hit that like button if you're watching us right now and subscribe to the channel so that way you get all of it. If you're listening on audio, make sure that you have given a rating and review so other people can find us as well. We've got more coming up here. This was an excellent episode 157. We appreciate everybody coming with you. We are presented by Bet Online here on the Believe Network. I'm Nathan. That's the Stoner. Trev was with us earlier. Did have to leave early, but I trust you. He's a fan. So until next time,
take the hill, Nathan.
Be a fan.